Subcommittee will come to order. Thank you so much, and sorry for the pause in the proceedings. What we are going to do is start with questions, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. Dr. Moline, is there any safe level of asbestos in consumer talc-based products?
No.
And why is that?
There's no safe level of asbestos, period. It's a carcinogen. It's a type 1 carcinogen, and there should be no exposure.
Dr. Longo, both the FDA and the EPA agree that there is no safe or acceptable level of asbestos for human exposure, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, just this past year, Johnson & Johnson CEO Alex Gorsky was asked in a deposition whether asbestos is safe. He stated, quote, "I would agree that asbestos is considered unsafe. I'm not an expert geologist or safety expert in that particular area, but generally speaking, we would say, yeah, asbestos is not safe." On October 18th, the FDA announced it had detected asbestos in J&J's talcum powder. Dr. Moline, what is the significance of this announcement?
That to this day, they're finding asbestos when they go off the shelf in talcum powder, and it's putting thousands, if not millions, of people at risk in the future.
Dr. Longo?
That is correct. And those results verify our results of finding amphibole asbestos in the Johnson & Johnson's product from the Chinese mine, which is the mine that's being used today.
Dr. Longo, it's important that we have sensitive testing methods to detect any level of asbestos in consumer products, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you personally tested historical samples of J&J's talcum powder, correct?
Yes, our laboratory has.
And from what decades did you test this powder?
We have analyzed samples from the 40s all the way up to the 2000s, as well as the current Johnson & Johnson products.
And what did you find?
Overall, 65% of all the samples we've tested were positive for regulated asbestos.
Did you use the same asbestos detection methods as J&J?
No, sir, we did not.
And how did they differ?
We used what is called a heavy liquid separation technique, which makes the analysis a lot more sensitive.
And do you believe that sensitivity is essential to detecting asbestos in talc?
Absolutely.
Now, has Johnson & Johnson ever acknowledged any asbestos detection tests that have concluded that the company's samples contain asbestos?
Not that I'm aware of.
So just so I understand, you've tested historical samples from the 40s through today.
Correct.
Using this HLS method of detection, and in those tests, you've determined 65% of those samples contain asbestos. But on the other hand, Johnson & Johnson has never acknowledged that any of their samples contain asbestos. How could that be?
Not currently, they haven't. Certainly, some of their testing of consultants in the past. They don't acknowledge it. They say that what we are testing is really not asbestos. And now it comes down to the argument of what's the geometry of the fibers versus what they call cleavage fragments.
Okay, and why does that matter?
Well, on our side, it doesn't matter because we're following absolute regulated protocols to identify asbestos recognized by EPA, OSHA, the ASTM, as well as the International Standards Organization. It's a defining on what the definition is. It's misleading at best.
Okay. Now, as you know, on October 18th, FDA announced its contract lab found asbestos in J&J's talcum powder. Did FDA's contract lab, this is the AMA firm, did they use the HLS method?
They did not.
What kind of method did they use, do you know?
I would call it the standard method where you have to find a needle in a haystack, and every now and then you'll find that needle, but it's rare. And they've had a rare event, in my opinion, that they found a needle in this particular bottle.
So what would have happened had they used the HLS method of detection, which is a much more sensitive method?
If they had used that method as in its current state, they would not have found the chrysotile asbestos, but they could have found the amphibole asbestos, which is what that method is really designed for.
And again, tell us what is the significance of finding one type of asbestos versus the other?
No significance because they're both regulated. The significance is that current products are being sold with trace amounts of asbestos in it.
Just so I understand, either one would be carcinogenic.
That's not my area, but I think Dr. Moline would tell you that either one is carcinogenic.
Dr. Moline, you want to tell us if either one is carcinogenic?
All of the forms of asbestos are carcinogenic.
Thank you.